So welcome everyone. I'm Karen Gimnig. I'm the Associate Director of the Cohousing Association, and on behalf of the association, welcome you to tonight's web chat. We also have Karen Hoskin with us. She's the Executive Director and listening in tonight. Probably some good questions coming from her, I would imagine. And just want to remind you that this is a service of the nonprofit association, the Cohousing Association of the U.S., and is funded through your donations. So if you would like to make a donation, we can put the link for that in the chat, and appreciate any support you can give us. I want to introduce Shelly. So Shelly Parks has had a career in leading professional sales and marketing teams, and she now shares her knowledge and skills with co-housing communities across the country. She and her husband are members of Skagit Cohousing, which is a developing community in Anacortes, Washington, and I have the pleasure of being with her in that project. So it's a special joy for me to introduce you to one of my soon-to-be neighbors. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shelly, and Shelly, feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karen, and welcome everyone. I'm just so glad that you're all here. Just a little bit, Karen shared a little bit about my background, but one of the things that was a bit unique in my background was I worked in retirement communities in their startup phase. So I would work with groups where they had to get people pre-committed, and then it would take often many years until the community was actually built. So it's been really fun for me to take what I learned professionally and bring it to co-housing, because so much of it is applicable. But this talk just originated, Karen reached out to me, and it just happened that particular day I was working on some Skagit co-housing things, and what I was specifically working on was really looking at how are we taking those people that are making their first steps into our community, how are we keeping them engaged and then moving them along to membership in the actual commitment stage. And I felt like it's the classic problem of co-housing, right? We're all busy with so many things. You're busy with all the different marketing things you're doing, and you're busy with meeting with your architect and the development, just so many things going on. How do we make sure that those people who are expressing interest in our community are staying engaged? So when Karen asked me if I would do this talk, I said, great, I would love to talk about this. So I'm sharing with you some of my thoughts through that, and I hope it's helpful. So I think that one of the challenges is, let me go ahead and get my screen up here. That'll keep me focused. Let's see. Oops, Karen, I just lost myself for some reason. Maybe lost my screen. Lost my presentation. Let me get to it. Sorry, everyone. It's not showing up on my, okay. I'm getting a weird message. There we go.
Oh, good.
Okay. Now let's get to the beginning of it. Okay. And let me make myself smaller. So, So the focus of this talk is, I really want to focus on how do we take those people that are interested in our community and bring them in a way that will bring them into full membership. And I'm going to share with you, just some of my thoughts and ideas. And I'm using this whole theme of hiking, because when I think about this, I think it's really a journey that's filled with these peaks and valleys that we have to go through, challenging climbs. At times we're really tired. Times we have amazing views and we feel like we've accomplished something. And bringing people along with us just really takes a lot of planning. So so the three areas that I want to focus on is looking at how do we define the path that we're going to go on? What are the expectations that we want to set with those people that are having the initial interest in our project? And then how do we walk along with our explorers? So, let me do one thing on my screen here real quick. Okay. So let's define the path here so we make sure we're all using the same language. So in the description of this, I use the term explore, and I'm using that term to describe someone that has made the first committed step into membership. And we'll talk about what that might look like from a financial commitment here in a minute. But I look at it as a person that has made a commitment to take a first tiny baby step forward. And when I think of groups, certainly groups that I've worked with, and they're moving people along the process to become a member, oftentimes I think that they are not real clear what the next step is for people, or they make the first step so big that it's like tackling the mountain first. And I always encourage groups to think of a way to create baby steps for people to move forward, so that it's not so daunting. It's like putting on your backpack and taking the first couple steps up the mountain, not necessarily having to look at the mountain first. So, and what does that commitment look like? And I would love to hear at the end of this, I'd love to hear what some of your groups are doing for this. But what we've done at Skagit Cohousing is the very first step that someone would take would be $100 check that they write to us, and then that allows them to become what we call an explorer. Now, some groups call that an associate member. I've heard all kinds of different terms, but I think many groups are now using that word explorer. And with that $100 commitment, they have, there's something emotional about writing a check to an organization. You now are plugged in with them. We have made that $100 commitment non-refundable. So there is a commitment there that they might lose it if they choose to not go forward. Some groups will make that first check really large. I've heard of groups that will make it as much as $500. And that to me always feels a little bit high, because you're making a mountain as the first step, I think, with a $500 check. That's my opinion. So I like the idea of creating some kind of financial commitment that's not so much that people wouldn't be stressed if they decided not to move forward. Somewhere between $100 to $250, I think, works really well for groups. Thinking of a timeline, what does that explorer status look like in terms of a timeline? Again, I'll share our experience with Skagit Cohousing. We decided to do a 3-month timeline. So as we're working with people and they're writing that first explorer check, the idea is that they have 3 months to explore us. They get to know us, we get to know them, and then decide if they want to move to membership. If they don't move to membership within those 3 months, then they lose their $100. If they do decide to move forward to membership, that $100 gets put towards their first membership fee. Whatever, for us that's $500, but different groups do different things. So one idea that I've heard some groups do that I really like is they do both a minimum and a maximum timeline. So they will say something like, you need to be an explorer for at least 2 months, and then you have 4 months within to make a decision. I like that because I have seen where people they become an explorer and they want to immediately move to membership. And I think there's value in giving people time to explore and really get to know the group and for the group to get to know them. Whoops, oh, sorry, going the wrong way here. So setting the expectation. So you have someone that has become an explorer and now, they're ready to dive into the group. And I think it's really valuable to create a buddy system. So they can connect with someone, that they have someone that they can call anytime. The buddy is there to answer the questions. It could be someone that's on your marketing team, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be someone that's on another team but is willing to be a buddy. Basically needs to be a friend to the explorer and come alongside them. And the role of a buddy is really to keep in very close contact with the explorer, to help them form the relationships within the group, to be welcoming. I think it's great to have weekly contact with the explorer, because I think it's challenging for groups sometimes, because if someone has made that commitment to become an explorer, it's easy to assume that they are really committed to the group, but in reality, they're still checking us out. So having that buddy that can stay really close with them, invite them to coffee. I think inviting them to a dinner party where they might be able to meet other members in a more social setting is really great. Keeping the explorer informed. Now, we had a lot of questions about what should our explorer have access to, and we had a lot of conversations around this, and we finally decided that we really had nothing that was secret. We wanted our explorer to have access to everything. So we have our things on a Google Drive, all of our documents for our community. And so we give our explorers access to all those documents so that they can, poke around as much as they want, and get all the information that they feel like they need. And that's where a buddy can come in really handy, because if the explorer has questions about the documents, the buddy can be there to help support and answer those questions or get the explorer to the right person. I think that's also important for an explorer to have the opportunity to participate in any of the teams. I think sometimes that we ask an explorer, we have these different teams, which one would you like to be involved in? And sometimes they don't know exactly which one they would feel most comfortable in. So giving the explorer the opportunity to sit in on the different team meetings and get a feel for which group they feel like they would most fit in with is great. Sometimes you definitely have a need, and maybe you can also encourage your explorer to fill in on a certain group if you need certain things, help in a certain team. And then just making sure that your explorer is really clear about what the next steps are. I was working with a group recently, and they were struggling with not having their explorers become full members. And we were looking into, we're just examining their process and trying to figure out where were things breaking down. And it really came down to no one was asking the explorer if they were ready to move forward. So I think that just making sure that there is that conversation with an explorer to say, are you ready to move forward to membership? And if not, what are your concerns, and can we talk through them? One more thing I want to say about having a buddy is I think that oftentimes people, as they're checking a group out, they're things that they might question or things that they might notice within a group. And if there is no one that's part of your community that's taking the time to have those deeper conversations with an explorer, the explorer might not feel comfortable raising those concerns or questions or thoughts that they have. And that only comes from having those deeper conversations. So you really have to figure out a way to make sure that you set the time aside to have those conversations with your explorer. I think that a challenge that we have as we're walking along with our explorers is that once people make that first commitment to your group, it's easy to, I mentioned this before, it's easy to think that they've made a commitment, so we can back down and they can figure out their own way to get to know our group and figure out their way around. But in fact, this is the time where we need to bring them really close to us. This is the time when a prospective member is most valuable to us. They've taken that first step and they are really valuable. So we have to put in that extra work to really walk alongside with them. I remember I had a conversation with one of our explorers recently, and it was interesting because they had heard something that they had misinterpreted, and to be able to talk through that was I think really just very important for the explorer to feel like they had a better understanding of what they, had interpreted and what they thought they understood. And yeah, so I think that's, that's the overview, but what I would like to share with you now is I created a checklist. So let's get to that. I'll stop share with that. And then I would love to open it up and hear thoughts or questions that people would have about how they work with their explorers that are thinking of joining their community. So let me get to checklist. Okay. Let's see. Oops, sorry, that's not what we want. Maybe. Are we seeing it now, Karen? The checklist up? I'm seeing it on my screen. It's good. Okay.
Yep, it's good.
Oh, good. Thank you. So, and I'm happy to share this with anyone. I think Karen can also put it up.
It's
I will make
already
sure
on the website.
Awesome. Thank you. This is definitely a work in progress, but it was the things that, as we were pulling together the checklist for Skagit Cohousing that we put together, and really making sure that, and I've already heard from one of our buddies how much they appreciated just having something to follow. It doesn't have to go in exactly this order, but it does give away. Let me scroll up a little bit so you can all see it. So, getting the buddy engaged with the explorer within 48 hours. And you can see here, it's just a checklist, introducing self, making sure that the buddy asks questions of the explorer so that the explorer has that opportunity to really share what their interest is in the community and what excites them about the community, because sometimes when we say things out loud, it becomes more real for us, as we all know. Making sure that all the dates, people know the dates. We use Zoom a lot, and as you all know, by using Zoom, sometimes the very first time you use Zoom can be a little scary, so helping our explorers with that. I do want to make note of explaining the expectations. It's really helpful for explorers to understand how much they can be involved. And I'll give you an example of something we had happen with Skagit Cohousing. Is we are right in the middle of our design phase, so there are a lot of emails and a lot of things going on that our explorers are seeing. And we had one explorer that had a lot of really great ideas, but not a lot of background. And she was sharing a lot of her ideas on the email chains. And I think it was confusing some of our members. And so we had, this was someone I was a buddy with, and I had a chat with her just to make her list of questions and hold back a little bit and really use this opportunity to observe us, because it can be difficult if explorers are jumping in without having a lot of opportunity to have the background. So I think it's important to set that expectation with the explorer if you feel like your group needs that. I think depending on where your group might be, you might not need to do that, but we felt like we had to. If you do an orientation meeting, make sure they have all the information. And I think it's really nice to get a short bio and be able to share that in your newsletter or community communication or whatever else that you're doing. Make sure that you ask for permission to do that. And then, of course, getting the next calls is scheduled. And then you're just staying very close with your explorer. You'll see down here at the bottom where making sure that you send an email to community members, also welcoming and introducing the new explorer. That's really helpful for existing members to know a little bit more about the explorer, and then they can also help the explorer feel welcome at meetings and such. So I would love to open it up and hear what thoughts or questions people have, and I am going to stop this share so I can see people's faces.
Okay, so someone's asking, could we post the link to the document? And Judy, that will be on the web chats page, and I can post a link to that. But everything related to the web chats is on that page. Karen wants to know, how do you assign a buddy if you have some members that are better at being a buddy than others?
Karen, that's such a great question. I should say that, we in the marketing team did have a conversation about who in our group did we think would be especially great buddies. And we just went directly to them and said, would you act in this role for us? I think it's okay to pull out those people in your group that would be the best buddies, because it is a really important role.
Okay. Other questions? This is your chance to ask about all sorts of marketing things, probably. Can we put you on the spot a little bit, Shelly?
Sure.
So, co-housing marketing. This is your chance. What else do you wish to know? And you can put it in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute and just ask your question directly.
Yeah, this is Dean, and I have a question. How concerned are you upfront with the ability of explorers to actually financially complete the process? It seems to me we get a lot of interest from people who we're pretty sure couldn't afford to do this. And so how do you react to that kind of situation?
Yeah, thank you, Dean, for raising that question. I know as I work with groups, we talk about this a lot, because, and I always encourage groups to have that financial conversation early on in the process, even before I think they're an explorer, because there's nothing worse than having a person think that this might work and they go along the process and then they find out that it doesn't work for them. And it's certainly hard on the group because you've spent a lot of time and energy. So I encourage groups to have that financial conversation really early. And if it's possible, if someone is getting ready to write that check to become an explorer, to have coffee and just have that conversation about the finances ahead of time, I think is really wise. If the check comes in and you throw them onto the explorer list, it's a little bit more difficult to sometimes people might become an explorer and they can't move to membership, and that's a little bit more challenge. But it's okay to have those financial conversations up front, I think. Does that help?
Shelly, it's Susie.
Hi, Susie.
Hi. we've had several explorers hop on pretty quick and hop off pretty quick recently, and I've almost come to the conclusion that before they become an explorer, that we need to like go to coffee and explain some of those and talk about some of those things, including the financial side of it, that we might have covered in an orientation a little later, and just to, but instead of doing that in a, you know, in a handout or in a,
For sure.
you know, doing it face to face is probably a better way to do that. Although at the time you don't want to answer all the questions, because then it's like, why become an explorer? So trying to find a balance in there, but having it be a little more personal
Yeah.
on that front end.
Yeah, because I think, thank you, Susie. I like what you've just said, because I think it does make sense. If someone is getting ready to actually write a check to become an explorer, usually we would assume that we've had a relationship with them in some way, right? So being able to have coffee with them ahead of time and make sure that they understand, because yeah, I think that's a lot of wasted energy if people become explorers and then don't move forward because we haven't done our homework before they're explorers, right?
Right. I mean, we've had people write checks, you know, at the end of a presentation, and we've taken them, and I've realized that's probably not a good idea. And then we've also had folks where, you know, it's like one in the couple is all in and the other's not, and so one writes the check and then the other one influences later, and that's been really difficult. I mean, you know, I've actually had somebody hand me a check and say, now it's your job to convince my wife. You know. You know, I don't think I can assume that responsibility.
Co-housing and marriage counseling.
So yeah, I think we're going to shift how we do that just maybe a little bit, because of some experiences that we've had.
Yeah, and I think Susie, you have the minimum time too. Do I remember that correctly? That you have asked explorers to be explorers for a minimum amount of time?
I'm sorry, ask me that question again.
Do you have a minimum amount of time that you ask? Like, if someone becomes an explorer, they can't move to membership without some minimum time frame. Is that right? That you?
I don't know that we formally set minimum time frame, but we don't let people come straight into membership.
Yeah.
They have to become an explorer first and go through an orientation at least.
Yeah, I know that we had someone that became an explorer and wanted to move to membership immediately. She just was so excited about the group, and you know, after and she was pretty involved as an explorer, but then did come to the realization that just the timing was not right for her, partly because of some financial situations. But I'm really thankful that we didn't let her move to membership very quickly, because it just wouldn't have been the right thing.
Well, and it's I find it I know it's not personal, but I'm so tied in with all of it that I feel bad when somebody drops out, and I know it's not me, and oftentimes I understand their decisions, but you know, it's that getting over that hump of, oh darn, we lost another one kind of a thing.
Right.
So I have a few questions on the chat. Judy says, we are recruiting young families to our community and they are staying in the beginning phase without moving to membership. How do we move them forward?
Yeah, I wonder, I would love some little bit of clarification about why, and you said this was from Judy, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Judy, why do you think they're not moving forward?
Well, I think it's, we're starting a co-housing community in Marin County, so prices are like over the top. And so the people, we're trying to make half of our community young families and half older, mature folks, whatever, without kids. And those, of course, are the easy ones to be able to go in. And so we're trying to give our young families as much time as they need. But we have several of them who've had babies and all that sort of thing. But it seems like we can't get them back in the loop. They just kind of hang out there. So it's finances, it's a busy, young nurturing time. They get excited about it, but I think just with the economy and all the uncertainties, they're not ready yet. And they do have an extensive financial workshop.
Yeah. So Judy, do you have a time frame where people need to make that decision by?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think we've said 3 months, but I don't think that we've been strict on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we do have a buddy system, and I don't know what their follow-up has been. I don't know if it is weekly, and I think that may be a starting point.
Yeah. Okay. And I know that I have worked with groups where they've become a little bit soft with that time frame. And I know what we did is we built in a seniority based on unit selection based on when they become members.
We do.
And, yeah. So if you don't make that commitment by a certain date, you lose that opportunity for seniority. And I think that is like, yeah.
Okay.
So if you,
a specific date to lose the seniority. So
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that then that creates, it does create that urgency to make a decision. And I think that, this is where the buddy system would come in really handy, is having that buddy make sure that they sit down and talk and say, are you planning? If not, if it's a financial reason, is there a way with your finance team to work out some kind of, plan or something? But to have that conversation would, I think, be valuable.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Thank you.
So Karen wants to know, one of the Karens wants to know, can you discuss orientation? How do you orientate the first few explorers on things like governing or decision-making models that haven't been decided yet because there is no core group yet? Or can the two burning souls make decisions, then orient from there?
This is a moving target, isn't it? It's another great question. I have found that our orientation has really evolved as we've gone along, and I think most groups really evolve depending on where you're at. And I think the one most important thing is being able to share with the explorers in really clear terms, where are we at this moment? Mm-hmm. And then and let them know that, we can't go backwards and make changes or relook at things that, especially when you're going through a design phase, you can't go backwards and go back to things. So trying to just meet where you are in your group and making sure that your explorer has all the information they need for that moment. I'm not sure if I answered that very well, but it's if you want more clarification, let me know.
Okay. Next, from another Karen, we at Arboretum Co-Housing opened 10 years ago. We do not vet buyers. Seller can potentially sell to anyone. Do you have any ideas how we can get the sellers to value having buyers get oriented to the community before their offer?
Mm-hmm. I what's coming to mind with that question is, and Karen and Karin help me, the gal that lives in the group in Maryland who has yes, make sure that you can connect with one of Anne's conversations about that, because she has that down really well. And when I heard her speak about that, I thought she understands that, and I don't think I can speak to it like Anne can.
Can I chime in for just a minute on that? Please. So essentially what Anne has put together, and she's at Tacoma Village in Washington, D.C. area, and what they did was they decided that if they wanted co-housing friendly, co-housing minded folks, that they needed to be doing the marketing. So that essentially they have a group, and all of this is on their website, so you can go find it. They're really open and happy to share it, but a whole system for constantly marketing their community, so that if someone wants to sell, this marketing team already has a list of buyers that they've been talking to, they've been inviting in, they've come to tours and all of that, so that you're filling from that list rather than just from the wide open. And there's another piece of it that they ask the sellers to make a voluntary donation that would be comparable to part of what they would have paid a real estate agent if they'd done a more traditional sale. So it's a robust program, as Shelly said. It's very impressive, and it's available through websites and things. We can try and help you get connected to that.
And Karen, I know that Anne is speaking at the conference in Portland. Is she speaking on that again? Do you know?
Karen, can you chime in on that? Do you know? I don't have that schedule memorized.
She is.
Okay. So if you're going to be at the conference, go to Anne's session because it's really good.
Yep. And it speaks to how all the things Shelly can get you started on with marketing before you move in turn out to continue to be helpful ongoing. So it all flows one into the next.
Yep.
Do you let people come to co-housing meetings before becoming an explorer?
I'm so glad that question's asked. We decided that we only let explorers come to our general meetings, that's one of the perks you get by becoming an explorer. And I know there are a lot of different schools of thought on that. I like the idea of having the explorer status something special, and that something special is you get the inside view of the group. That's working well for us.
Great. Pacific Gardens is 9
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's 9 years old. We insist that a serious prospective buyer has a co-housing conversation. That means a conversation with 4 to 6 community members, different demographics, old, young, parents, pet owners, etc. That way they get to hear about the issues. We have found it helps people who are not a good fit to select out.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice.
And then a question, Shelly, after they lose their housing priority because they've reached that due date, are they still able to attend meetings?
No. Yeah, I'm okay with that. You know, I'm okay with being strict about what that looks like for your explorers. And I think explorers that are serious appreciate that too. One thing I want to say is if you do open up your meetings to just anyone, sorry, I think there's some background noise in my house here. My husband's getting ready for his breakfast. Hold on. So I think that you do run into a problem if you invite anyone to come to your meetings without having that time to really talk with them about what it means to be an explorer and what the expectations are, because I know groups have run into trouble where people have asked basic questions that just take up time within your meeting, that I think we all know that we've got too many things to cover in our meetings as it is, without us helping people get oriented without having them understand what their role might be.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to talk about, so if someone sort of runs out of their explorer time window and then wants to join later, how that happens?
Yeah, so what I've said with explorers who have run out of time, but they still want to stay, I promise that we will keep them close. In my world, we would call them a hot lead, so any of those hot leads you'd want to keep really close to you. Keep them informed, keep them updated. The buddy can continue to keep them updated as needed. And that when they're ready to come back in, we will welcome them with open arms. They would write a new check and come back in as an explorer, and they would then set their priority place based on their new renewed date. Oh, Karen, I can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry. How do you feel about the Explorer fee being non-refundable and put toward costs like photocopying, legal fees, etc., i.e. it would not go toward the cost of their home? I mean, an Explorer fee that did not get applied to anything else. It was just a completely separate fee.
Yeah. To me, if you look, I guess, you could set it up that way, but it does give people a reason, if they're moving forward to membership, that they feel like they haven't, just lost that money, that it's moving towards something. I think there's a sort of a psychological piece to that might make people feel like there's a reason to move forward, that they've already got $100 or a couple $100 already invested, and they might want to move forward.
Okay.
Shelly, we do it. This is Susie talking. The way that we do it is non-refundable, first of all, regardless. And then second of all, it does go towards their membership fee, which is for us is $500 into the LLC. So they've already at that point paid half of their membership fee when they become an Explorer. If they don't continue, it's just non-refundable, period. But it does not go towards the cost of their home. It is the membership fee in the LLC, which is different than the investment that you're making in your home.
Yeah, thank you, Susie. We actually have ours set up the same way, but I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
I also had a comment about the whole selling of things. We do have another community here in Oklahoma, Oak Creek, and they've been open 6 years. And what they've been able to manage to do is to create a waiting list of people that have an interest that have already been, kind of talked with and about co-housing and all that. So they're already kind of bought into the concept. So when they have a home become available, rather than it getting listed with a realtor, that word goes out to the people that are on the waiting list, to all of them, not in a particular order. And they tell them what the house is and, how much, what's the asking price on it. And then those people contact, whoever's willing to pay the price, or if they get into a bidding war, which they recently did, the seller ended up getting, I think, $12,000 more than what the asking price was. So by having that group already kind of pre-qualified, that has worked really well, and then that you're not having to pay the realtor fee, and and they tell folks that if you'd like to make a donation to the community in lieu of the realtor fee, feel free to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of another way of looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So on this topic of the Explorer fee going toward the membership, the question is, so with that happening, can you recoup costs incurred later on somehow? So the photocopying costs and things like that associated with an Explorer, is there a way to recoup that later, is the question.
Well, I think those costs are built into your marketing budget, I would think. I mean, I feel like, your Explorers are, until you actually close on your homes, until someone moves in, you're still marketing even to your members, right? You want to make sure that you retain your members and keep members committed, because until you actually have your place built and they move in, it's, people can still decide not to move in. So I think that those costs just fall under the marketing budget is my take on that.
Great, thanks. And then a question about what meetings they are able to attend. We have Zoom calls for many of our meetings.
So we do the same. We're using Zoom we have our general meetings, and then we also include our remote people through Zoom. So our Explorers can attend those either in person or through Zoom. And then also if they'd like to sit in on any of the team meetings, they're welcome to do that.
Okay, I'm out of questions here.
Okay.
Pausing for a minute to see if we get a few more.
I have a question. Okay, how do you handle onboarding of Explorers when you're well through the process? I mean, when you've already made a lot of decisions, you're well along. How do you prepare yourself so that you can accept Explorers gracefully mid-process?
Yeah, that's when I mentioned setting the expectations. This is where it's really important to have those conversations. And I think an orientation meeting where you have a couple of Explorers together is great if you can do that. And because letting them understand, giving them a full picture of where you started, what's happened up until this point. If you have, I think it's important for your community to have what we call a decision logs, where everything gets logged anytime there's been major decisions, sharing that with an Explorer so that they can see the history that a community has, and just letting them know we can't go backwards. If you feel strongly that you need a 5-bedroom place and we didn't design a 5-bedroom place, you're not going to get a 5-bedroom place, right? So, and that's hard. And for sometimes it's easier for people because they don't want to go through all that, the challenges of a group forming. But I think it's just making sure that and it takes, one of the things that we tell our explorers and our new members is it takes a while for them to get up to speed. So just ask questions, work with your buddy, connect with other members that would have the answers that you need, just letting them feel very welcome and invited to reach out to whomever they need to reach out to get their answers. We share a member roster with our explorers, and I know when I was a buddy with a gal, I went through the member roster and just briefly talked about every person, so she would sort of know, what our group looked like, because she's not local, so she didn't have the opportunity to meet people. And I think also as a buddy, if you know that your explorer would really connect with, Dean and Jenny, making sure that I hold a dinner party or something where I invite other members over so they can connect. That's the role of a buddy, to make sure the explorer gets connected with other members who would have like minds.
Great. All right. I'm just scanning the chat here, but I think we've just got comments there. So any final words of marketing advice, Shelly?
It's all about relationships. Spend a lot of time talking with people, connecting with them, having coffee, having them over for dinner.
Great. There's a question. The questions now are coming back. Do you have co-housing potlucks regularly for interested people?
We don't do that at Skagit Cohousing, partly because we're spread out a bit and it's a lot of driving time. I know groups that do, but I think you have to be a little bit careful because you don't want to turn into a potluck club. I was working with a group in Minnesota one time and we were joking that they had a really great potluck club that had been going on for a long time, where they had interested people that weren't then making commitments to move forward. So what you don't want to have is a potluck club. So just to be mindful, but I think anytime you get people together over a meal, it's helpful. So anytime you can do that, but just, make sure that people understand what the next steps are.
Would the cost of the Coho conference in Portland be reimbursed somehow in a budget for the Burning Souls in particular?
By whose budget?
And Shelly's picture looked a little frozen there. There you are. You look like you're back.
Okay.
Like from the community budget, I'm assuming, is that question?
Can you repeat the question, please, Karen?
The question was, would the cost of the Coho conference in Portland be reimbursed somehow in a budget for Burning Souls in particular?
That's certainly up to the community if they feel like that's part of their budget.
I know of communities that have done that, usually on a partial basis has been my experience, that the person going to the conference puts in some and the community sometimes reimburses some. And so anyway, that's what I have seen happen.
Yeah.
Someone says, we invite the more highly interested people to our monthly socials so they can meet some of our members. What are the main criteria potential adventurers want to test themselves with before they even approach a conversation about exploring membership?
Interesting question. I think, so that actually prompts me to think of something I've seen co-housing groups do, is sometimes they make becoming an explorer difficult in the sense that they have I've seen where groups have pretty long questionnaires to get explorers to really be thinking about why would they want to commit to a co-housing group. And as I've worked with groups, I've encouraged them not to have those questionnaires early on, because that's what we want, is we want the people to explore us and get to know things, not to have to sometimes it's a process where we learn about co-housing, we learn about the people that we want to live with, and sometimes we're just not there to really answer those questions in depth. So it feels like we're making them go over climb a mountain that maybe they're not ready to climb yet. So I'm not sure if that really answers that question, but I don't know. I think it's our responsibility to help the explorers find out about us rather than us asking them to test themselves within co-housing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Can you help identify signs that indicate a hot prospect, those folks that you want to spend your time on?
Yeah, this is where when I do my workshops for groups, we talk a lot about this. So, and a lot of it is just experience, but we talk about, in the sales world, we talk about buying signals. So when you hear people talking about what it would be like for them to live in the community, what you're hearing is you're hearing them talking themselves into making that decision to join the community. And I think it's a little hard to know to listen for those if you haven't had a lot of experience, but if you are hearing people say, oh yeah, I would really, that 2-bedroom unit would be a perfect size for us, that's what's called a buying signal. So they're actually imagining themselves. So anytime you hear people talking like that, get them talking about it more, right? Ask questions like, oh, tell me more about why you think that, because they're shifting their thoughts in their head to actually becoming members. That's my quick answer. The rest of it you can, I know at the conference I'm doing an intensive on Friday, and we'll be talking about that in more detail.
Okay. What about a simpler list? Finances were mentioned earlier.
Could we get clarification on that question?
Yeah. Does that person want to chime in and let us know? Following up on an earlier question. So the main criteria, yeah, are there things people want to know? Trying to see if I can figure out that. That simpler list, finances were mentioned earlier. So things people want to check out, like, is the question about like what would they want to know about whether they're fit, so that like they need to check to make sure their finances work? Are there other things they should be checking sort of with, like, do I fit in this way?
Yeah, I mean, again, if they're plugged into your group, hopefully they'll self-select themselves out if it's not a good fit, right? And I think, going back to the finance question, though, I think it is important for groups to know ultimately what their targeted home prices will be as soon as you can. Because if you don't, you might have people coming on board that have unrealistic expectations of what it might cost to ultimately move into your community. And that wouldn't be a good thing, right? If you have people that are investing money and then they get to a point where you get real about the budget and what their home might cost, and then they have to bow out at that point. That nobody wants that. So, as soon as you can, early in the process, get real about the cost of your units or in your homes in your community. I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Well, we are nearing the end of our hour. So Shelly, thanks for all that great information.
Oh, thank you.
I love the stories. They're a little familiar to me, but I always love to hear like life from the trenches. I think that's such valuable information. So Shelly mentioned the conference. We've mentioned that a couple of times. So that's in Portland. The last 2 days of May are the pre-conference intensives. And Shelly, is that are you doing one of those?
Mm-hmm, I am. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And then the first 2 days of June are the Saturday, Sunday conference. There's tour options throughout, and registrations are coming in quite quickly. We're thrilled about that. And if you haven't registered yet, you may want to go ahead and do that. It's helpful to us to have it early. And Shelly, do you want to say anything about the conference?
Well, I would say that, let's see, it was the Salt Lake City when I had just discovered co-housing about 2 months before that conference. And I said, oh, I want to go to this. And it changed my life. So, I love the conferences, and thanks to Karen and Karin for all the hard work that, is done behind the scenes, and all the other people, because it's an amazing way for those of us who are passionate about living in co-housing to learn from each other and share. And so if you have not registered, you need to register, and encourage all your friends to do so too.
Great. Thanks, Shelly. So I think that is the public service announcements for tonight. The video of this chat will go up on the website, cohousing.org. If you could look under the Connects tab to the WebChat's videos and documents. And Shelly also shared her slides, so I will get that up there as well. And that checklist is already there if you want to go looking for that.
And Karen, on those slides, I know it has my phone number, I believe, and my email. So anyone's welcome to reach out to me anytime. Please do so. If you have thoughts or questions, I'll be happy would love to talk with you. Wonderful.
So that should be up within the next couple of days. And if anyone has questions, let us know. The web chat next week. Oh, I forgot to look it up. I'm losing my game here. Karin, do you have that right in front of you? If not, I can pull it out.
Yep, it's Jana on Wednesday the 20th, Jana Ludwig. She is doing skills for a cooperative culture.
Wonderful. All right. So thanks everybody for being here. Another great web chat, and we will see you next week. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.